The grand forum of the Stellar Alliance shimmered with gold and light, a coliseum of diplomacy suspended in the clouds of a luminous world. Alien voices thundered across the vast dome, deep, sharp, humming, whistling, all languages converging into one chaotic song of power and posturing. Banners from 100 worlds swayed above in artificial wind, casting shadows over the obsidian floors. But amid the grandeur, amid the towering forms of titans, insectoids, and scaled warriors, no one noticed the girl standing near the edge of the hall. Princess Laura of the Skela stood just under a meter tall. Her silver and indigo robes, woven from threads known only to her people, shimmered like starlight, and a delicate crown of iridescent crystal glinted atop her brow. Her violet eyes scanned the chamber, shoulders straight, posture regal, but beneath the elegance was a thundering silence. Not one glance met hers. Not one voice called her name. Diplomats walked past her like she was a ghost. Worse, some snickered. 2 serpentine envoys whispered as they passed, glancing her way with a curl of mockery. Another, a warrior from the Sutor line, simply waved his hand dismissively and muttered, "Let the children play." Every alien male in the galaxy, it seemed, had already decided she was not worth hearing, and yet she stood there, her chin high, swallowing the bitter sting of invisibility. The Skela had once been architects of stellar gates, designers of the T's. Original translation networks that allowed cross-species understanding, but that was generations ago. Now they were a footnote in history, irrelevant, small, weak. She tried not to flinch when another delegate bumped into her, didn't even look down, and moved on without a word. Across the chamber, Captain Marcus Hale leaned against a marble pillar. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in the dark navy of the Earth Coalition security detail, he blended into the architecture, watching everything with a soldier's quiet intensity. His steel blue eyes caught movement among the crowds. Small figure in royal robes who seemed to be in the room but not of it. He watched her for a long moment. The way she carried herself, deliberate, careful, proud even in the face of rejection, reminded him of something. Maybe someone. She wasn't like the others. She didn't shout to be heard. She didn't demand space. But she had presence. And that made him curious. Later, Rhea stepped out onto a quiet balcony. The stars shimmered above the city, and the golden spires of the Forum towered around her like frozen waves. She gripped the railing and took a deep breath, blinking away the wetness in her eyes. Giving up already? A voice said. She turned, startled. The human stood a few feet away, hands raised in mock surrender. His voice was calm, not mocking. "Are you?" she asked, more sharply than intended. "Captain Marcus Hale, Human Coalition." "I was just making sure you weren't about to jump off," he said with a smirk. Her lips thinned. "Your humor is misplaced. Maybe. Or maybe you're too used to people not seeing you," he said, stepping closer. "But I see you." She blinked, unsure how to respond. He leaned on the railing beside her. "You know, they all talk like their voices matter more just because they're loud. Maybe they don't listen because you haven't made them listen yet." She looked at him, genuinely seeing him now. There was no mockery in his voice, no pity, just truth, and for the first time in days, she didn't feel so small. The grand forum shimmered beneath 3 setting suns, casting long golden shadows across the marble floors. Hundreds of voices echoed like thunder through the vast hall, each delegate vying for attention, each speech laced with ego, power, and ancient grudges. In the middle of it all, Princess Luria sat in her assigned place, far from the central platform, near the fringes, as if her very presence was an afterthought. Her chair, designed for someone twice her size, swallowed her small frame. The hollow space around her was not empty by accident. It was made by centuries of silence. Her fingers trembled in her lap, hidden beneath flowing sleeves. She had spent hours preparing her address, choosing each word with care, practicing every tone of her voice. And yet, doubt scratched at her heart. They wouldn't listen. They never did. A booming voice echoed from the center platform. The Arakan. General Massive horned, his voice like shattering glass, was in the middle of mocking a trade proposal. Laughter erupted around him. Lara's hands clenched tighter. They think I'm a joke, she thought. Not a threat, not even a footnote. Across the hall, her eyes met Marcus's. He stood in the shadows again, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. When she looked away, her heart was racing. A chime rang out. The council was moving to vote. She stood. The gesture was so small, so quiet, it almost went unnoticed. But when she stepped forward, the movement rippled. A wave of whispers began to spread. Is she? The Skela princess? What is she doing? The chamber's attention, once impossible to grasp, now fell heavily upon her like a falling moon. Every eye turned. Some widened in curiosity. Others narrowed in irritation. Lra walked down the steps, each footfall echoing louder than it should have. As she approached the central platform, voices grew louder. The Skela wished to speak? One delegate from the Dravek system laughed. Do they even have vocal cords? Another, a delegate with iridescent skin and 6 eyes, smirked. Let her speak. We could use a break. The general from the Orion Empire leaned forward, his molten skin pulsing with heat. What can an insect teach the stars? Ra ignored them all. She climbed the steps to the podium, each step a defiance. The chamber fell still. For a breathless moment, she looked out across the sea of giants. Her voice, when it came, was not loud, but it was sharp, clean, undeniable. The Skela do not ask for pity, she said. We do not beg. We do not kneel. We stand. We rise. We create. A hush fell. Even the Orion general narrowed his eyes. You have dismissed us for our size, forgotten us for our quiet, she continued. But it is not mass that holds a civilization together. It is mind. It is will. It is the refusal to vanish. A ripple of movement passed through the delegates. She saw confusion, then anger, and buried deep something new, interest. If this council values only the loudest voice or the strongest limb, she said, her voice rising, then it is doomed to crumble beneath the weight of its own arrogance. The future does not belong to the giants. It belongs to those who endure. The chamber exploded. Voices clashed. Outrage rose. Laughter, insults, even applause. One delegate demanded she be removed. Another called for silence. The hall had never been so alive. And then, from the back, you heard the princess, came the calm, commanding voice of Captain Marcus Hale. Maybe you should listen for once. A spotlight swept across the chamber and landed on the human. His uniform was crisp, his stance casual, but his voice cut through chaos like a blade. Or are you too afraid of what the small might become? Gasps echoed. Someone shouted, "This is against protocol." Marcus didn't flinch. He simply nodded toward Laura, then crossed his arms again. She turned back to the delegates, her heart beating like a war drum. And in that moment, she saw it not acceptance, not yet, but a crack. She had split the silence. As she descended the platform, her legs felt weak. The applause was not loud, but it existed. The voices that mocked her had been answered. Some watched her with narrowed eyes. Others simply watched. And then came the general. He blocked her path in the corridor beyond the chamber. Towering above her, his body radiated heat. You've grown bold, little insect, he hissed, voice low. But words mean nothing in this hall. Your people will remain forgotten. Lara met his burning eyes without fear. Then it's a shame, General. that someone so large fears the voice of someone so small. His growl rumbled like a storm dot, but before he could move closer, Marcus's voice echoed again. "You're in my way." The general turned, molten lips curling in contempt. "You humans play a dangerous game, and you're bad at reading." "The room," Marcus said, flatly with a scowl. The general turned and vanished into the shadows. Lara stood still for a moment, her breath shaking. "You all right?" Marcus asked, stepping beside her. She nodded, then glanced at him with something that looked like gratitude. "You were supposed to be observing, weren't you?" she said quietly. Marcus smirked. "You looked like you could use a wingman." And for the first time since she arrived at the Forum, Princess Luria allowed herself the smallest smile. The stars above the Forum world had barely begun to fade when the message arrived. Princess Luria stood at the long window of her chamber, her hands clasped behind her back. The morning light washed over the golden towers in soft hues of lavender and blue, but she couldn't enjoy it. Her speech at the Forum had shaken the chamber. She had seen it in their faces. Something had changed, a crack in the armor of silence. But cracks draw eyes, and enemies. A knock interrupted her thoughts. One of her advisors, a frail, elderly skela with deep worry lines carved into his face, hurried in, breathless, clutching a silver data slate. "They've responded, Your Highness," he said. "The Orians have invoked the right of merit." Ra's brow furrowed. "That hasn't been used in centuries." "The Council approved it. They've accepted the General's challenge. He claims that your species' worth must be demonstrated through strength." Laura felt her breath catch. "They want combat," the advisor whispered. "A duel." The words hit like ice down her spine. In the culture of the Orians, combat was sacred. Honor, worth, even law, it was all measured by who stood last in a ring of fire. But Laura wasn't an Orian. The skela were engineers, designers, artists. They built cities that floated on suns, programmed languages into song. They had no champions, no soldiers. She turned away from the window, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "Who do they want me to fight?" "Their champion, Ragnar." The advisor trembled. "He's a mountain of molten stone." "Your Highness, this is a trap. They don't expect you to win. They expect you to die." Laura said nothing for a moment. She simply stared into the fading stars. Then, without turning back, she spoke, "Tell them I accept." Later, in the private chambers beneath the Forum, Marcus exploded. "You accepted what?" he snapped, pacing the stone floor. His arms were folded tight, but his voice burned with barely restrained fury. "A duel with a molten giant? Are you insane?" Laura stood calmly, arms at her sides. "I had no choice. If I refuse, they'll claim it as proof that the skela are weak." "You're not a soldier," Marcus growled. "You're barely a meter tall. He'll crush you in seconds." "Then we'll need to make sure he doesn't get that chance." He stopped, turning sharply to her. His expression softened as her words sank in. She wasn't being naive. She was serious. "What are you thinking?" he asked. She looked up at him, eyes full of something dangerous. "Something new. I'm not going to fight his way," she said. "I'm going to fight mine." The next 24 hours blurred into motion. Marcus requisitioned training space beneath the coalition quarters. He cleared it out, brought in weapons non-lethal, but functional, and began drilling her. "The Orians fight with brute force," he explained, throwing punches at a target dummy. "You can't match that. But you're fast, precise. If you know where to strike, you don't need to break them. Just make them fall." He handed her a small silver rod, barely the length of her arm. "What is it?" "A human stun rod. Non-lethal. Electric charge. Short burst. Enough to knock a soldier off balance. We use it in riot control. If you hit the right nerves, it'll drop a man twice your size." She gripped it tightly. How do I use it? I'll show you. But first, he stepped toward her, placed his hand on her shoulder. You need to believe you can win. Don't, she whispered. He didn't move. Then believe in me until you do. They trained through the night. Marcus taught her where to strike. Behind the knee, under the arm, the side of the neck. Every movement was measured. When she stumbled, he helped her up. When she gasped for breath, he simply nodded and said, again. At one point, she collapsed against the wall, eyes full of tears she refused to let fall. They'll laugh at. She muttered. Then make them choke on it. Marcus said. In the final hour before dawn, Laura stood in the center of the practice floor, sweat dripping from her brow, holding the stun rod like it was part of her hand. She wasn't a warrior, but she was something else now. She was ready. As the forum's horns blared for the start of the trial, Laura walked down the long corridor toward the arena of merit. Her steps were slow, not from fear but control. Each footfall was a beat in her own song. She would not tremble. Not today. Marcus waited at the entrance. His face was unreadable. You sure about this? She nodded. Double quotes, no matter what happens, you've already won, he said. You made them listen. She paused, looked up at him, and whispered, not enough. Not yet. And then she walked into the arena. The stands above were filled with delegates. Towering beings from across the galaxy watched with varying degrees of amusement and disdain. They expected blood. They expected a message. Stay in your place, little girl. On the far end of the ring, Ragnar emerged. He was a colossus. His molten skin cracked and hissed with every step. His fists were the size of Laura's entire torso. The crowd roared at his presence. Lara stepped into the circle, tiny, alone, unarmored save for her determination. She held the stun rod at her side. Her breath was slow, steady. The Grand Speaker's voice rang out. By the call of the Orion Empire and acceptance of the Skela delegation, the trial of merit begins now. A bell rang. Ragner are charged. Lara didn't move. Not yet. He moved like an avalanche. Molten fists raised high, Ragnar thundered toward her, each step leaving smoking craters in the arena floor. He roared, a guttural sound that shook the stones and echoed through the stands above. The crowd was a sea of noise, some cheering, some jeering, others already predicting the outcome with smirks on their smug alien faces. Princess Laura didn't flinch. Instead, she waited. Her knees bent slightly. The stun rod pulsed with a faint electric hum in her grip. Her mind sharpened to a single point of clarity. She had no strength to match him. But she had something better. Precision. Ragnar's first strike came like a meteor. His molten fist crashed down with enough force to split steel. But Laura was already gone. She rolled to the side, her robes trailing like silk across the scorched earth. The ground cracked. Fire sparked. Gasps rang from the audience. She didn't stop. Lara pivoted, light on her feet, and struck quick and sharp against the back of Ragnar's massive knee. A burst of electricity crackled through the air. Ragnar stumbled, letting out a roar of surprise more than pain. On the balcony above, Marcus leaned forward, gripping the railing, eyes locked on her every move. That's it, Laura, he murmured. Keep moving, don't stop. But Ragnar recovered. Fast. He twisted with terrifying speed for a creature of his size and swung an arm the size of a starship engine toward her. Lara ducked, the wind of his strike nearly knocking her off balance. She scrambled away, heart hammering in her chest. A fada. Second swing followed, a low, wide arc designed to flatten her. She vaulted over it. The crowd gasped again. The mockery had stopped. Now they were watching. Now they were unsure. Alara didn't feel the weight of their stares. She felt only the heat of Ragnar's fury, the burn of her lungs, the sting of her aching legs. But her mind was sharp. She remembered every move Marcus had taught her. And she had one goal: make him fall. Ragner charged again, faster this time. Rage made him reckless. He swung high. Too high. Lr ducked under his arm, slid between his legs, and jabbed the stun rod into the soft joint behind his ankle. The electric surge dropped him to one knee. The earth shuddered. He howled. And now the silence in the stands began to spread like wildfire. What was happening wasn't a fluke. It was real. The princess wasn't surviving. She was fighting. Above, Marcus's jaw tightened. They underestimated the wrong girl. Ragnar rose, furious, his body glowing brighter. Now veins of lava pulsing through his arms. Stand still, insect. He roared, his voice shaking the arena walls. He lunged. No precision. Just raw fury. Lra barely escaped the strike, but it grazed her shoulder. Hot, blistering pain seared through her robes. She bit down a cry and kept moving. She knew she wouldn't last long in a drawn-out fight. Her breaths were growing ragged. Her legs ached. And Ragnar, despite everything, was still strong enough to crush her with one blow. So she made a choice. End it now. As Ragnar turned again, disoriented and panting, Laura darted forward, swift as a spark. She ducked under his arms, used the slope of his shin to climb halfway up his side, and with every ounce of control she had left, she jammed the stun rod into the base of his neck, right where Marcus had said the nerves were most exposed. Surge of light was blinding. Ragnar screamed a monstrous sound of rage and disbelief and collapsed forward with a thunderous crash. The earth split beneath him. The shock wave rattled the walls. Dust rose in a massive cloud, swallowing everything. For a moment, there was only silence, the kind of silence that feels like the universe itself is holding its breath. Then, slowly, the dust settled. And through it, standing alone, legs shaking, robes scorched, chest heaving Princess Laura. The stun rod fell from her grip and clattered to the ground. She didn't hear it. The sound of the crowd returning to life overpowered everything else. Cheers. Roars. They stood. Some of the most powerful beings in the galaxy stood and applauded the tiny Skela princess, who had done the unthinkable. Above, Marcus exhaled, finally releasing the breath he'd held since the first strike. He smiled soft and wide, pride swelling in his chest. "Damn, Laura," he whispered. "You really did it." As the applause thundered, the Orion General stone-faced and stunned rose slowly in the gallery. His champion lay unconscious. His threat had failed. And now, the galaxy was watching not him, but her. Lra stumbled back from the center of the arena, her legs numb beneath her. Every inch of her body ached. She felt the burn in her shoulder, the bruises along her spine. But none of it mattered, because she had won. Not with strength. Not with size. But with belief. And suddenly, everything was different. Guards opened the chamber gates. A path cleared for her. As she passed, even her old skeptics looked at her differently now, not as a girl in a costume, but as a warrior in her own right. When she stepped into the corridor beyond, Marcus was already there waiting. He moved to her quickly, steadying her as she nearly collapsed. "You're insane," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I've never seen anything braver." Laura leaned against the wall, her breath uneven. "Do you think... it's enough?" Marcus helped her to her feet and smiled. "It's a start." And the galaxy just saw it with their own eyes. And for the first time since she had arrived at the forum, Laura felt the weight of history shift not away from her, but toward her. The silence didn't last. It never does. In the hours after Princess Ria's victory, the halls of the Stellar Forum buzzed louder than ever. Words spread faster than ships through corridors. Comms and every broadcast channel across the galaxy. The insect princess. The molten champion defeated. The skela. Victorious. Delegates who once couldn't remember her name now paused in their steps when she passed. Their eyes, once indifferent or mocking, now studied her with something closer to curiosity, if not yet respect. She was no longer invisible, but visibility, as Lura quickly learned, came with shadows. As the light of day faded, so too did the applause. And in its place rose murmurs. Whispers. Calculations. Some called it luck. Others heresy. But one voice, dark, furious, and dangerous, spoke louder in silence than all the rest. General Talek of the Orion Empire sat in his private chamber, alone but for the echo of his own rage. His molten eyes flickered with restrained fury as he watched the replay of the duel again and again. Each time Lara dodged. Each time Ragnar fell. Each time the crowd erupted in disbelief. Every moment was a knife driven into the pride of his people. His fists clenched, sparks dripping from his knuckles to the stone floor. She's no warrior, he muttered. She's a trickster, a liar, a threat. His aide entered quietly, eyes low. The other empires are watching her now, General. They're asking questions. Talek rose. Then we answer them. Not with words, with fire. Elsewhere, in the upper chambers of the forum, Uri sat with Marcus in a quiet lounge bathed in soft blue light. Her robes were simpler now. Her crown gone, her body still carried the aches from the fight. But her eyes, they burned brighter than ever. You've started something, Marcus said, sipping from a silver mug. I didn't mean to start anything, Lara replied. I only wanted them to see us. Marcus gave her a look. You don't start revolutions. On purpose, you just stop bowing. She smiled faintly, then looked out the glass wall toward the starlit city beyond. What happens next? He sighed. You've embarrassed the most dangerous species in this alliance. Publicly, in front of everyone. They're not going to let that stand. She turned to him, voice calm. Then let them come. He leaned closer. They already are. That night, the shadows moved. 3 figures cloaked in dark armor stepped through the garden levels of the forum's east wing. Their bodies pulsed with dim, molten light beneath the plates of obsidian armor. Orion enforcers, trained not for war but for elimination. Quiet, brutal, final. Their orders were simple. Make the message clear. She defied the Empire. Now she would vanish. Princess Lara had taken to walking the gardens after long meetings. It was the only place in the city that felt like air. Vines from a dozen worlds crawled up crystal walls. Flowers opened under moonlight. Water sang over smooth stone. Tonight, she walked alone. The guards assigned to her had been dismissed by a forged command. It wasn't chance. It was precision. Her footsteps echoed faintly. Her hand grazed a glowing vine. Her thoughts drifted to the skela homeworld of her father, who still believed. Of her mother's grave, carved into the cliffs. Of her people watching from afar, waiting to know if she had succeeded. She didn't hear the first one behind her, but she felt the heat. A sudden rush of air. She turned just in time to see a shadow lunging forward, massive, armored, fast. A flash of memory, molten eyes, clenched fists. Her body froze. Then a shout and fire. A bolt of plasma struck the ground between her and the assassin, throwing him back with a burst of light. Get down. Marcus's voice roared. He came charging from the shadows, blaster drawn, eyes blazing. The other 2 Orions emerged, circling. Marcus stepped in front of Lara, shielding her. His gun raised, stance low and precise. Touch her, he growled, and I swear I'll show you just how stubborn humans can be. The enforcers didn't speak. They moved. Fast. One lunged from the side. Marcus pivoted, shot him in the knee, dropping him with a scream. The second came from behind. Lara saw it, eyes wide. Marcus! He spun, barely in time to deflect the blow with the side of his weapon. He stumbled, caught the punch to the ribs, and rolled. Pain burst through him, but he didn't stop. He rose again, teeth gritted, and fired at the enforcer's exposed joint. The Orion fell. The third stood still, massive, unmoved, watching. "Run," Marcus said to Laura, panting. "I won't," she replied. The last Orion removed his mask. It wasn't just an assassin. It was General Talek himself. "You embarrassed my house," he said softly. "You insulted my name. And now, little princess, I will erase you from the stars." He charged, but Laura didn't move. Marcus stepped between them again, and fired, twice. Taluk caught the bolts with his armor. Stumbled but kept coming. His hand wrapped around Marcus's throat, lifting him off the ground. Lara ran, not away. Toward. She grabbed Marcus's fallen blaster, aimed it with both trembling hands, and fired at the back of Talek's knee. The general roared and dropped Marcus. They fought together. No longer soldier and diplomat, just two against power. Marcus with a knife, Rhea with the blaster. They moved as one. Finally, Talek staggered back, injured, growling. Sirens wailed in the distance. Security forces arrived. Talek vanished into the darkness. The attack failed, but the warning was clear. As medics tended to Marcus's wounds, Laurie sat beside him, silent, her robe singed, her hands shaking. "They won't stop," she whispered. Marcus looked at her, face bruised, voice hoarse. "Then neither will we." The next morning, the forum felt different. Beneath the polished floors and golden spires, tension coiled like a coiled serpent ready to strike. Whispers traveled faster than formal announcements. Every corridor hummed with urgency. Every glance held weight. Princess Laura had survived an assassination attempt, and worse for the Orians, she had survived it. With witnesses, footage of the attack was already circulating through secure channels. Diplomatic aides who once scorned her now kept their voices down. Even the most arrogant species in the chamber were asking the same question, though few dared speak it aloud. Had they underestimated the skela too long? Inside her private chambers, Luria stood before a mirror, her violet eyes sharp and steady. Her robes were different now, simpler, stripped of ceremonial excess. She looked like a leader, not a decoration. Across the room, Marcus sat stiffly in a chair, bandages across his shoulder. Despite the medic's warnings, he refused to rest. "They're not done," he said quietly. Lara nodded. "Neither am I." Marcus studied her. "You're thinking of something." She turned to him, the spark in her eyes no longer hesitant. "It was fire, controlled, dangerous, needed. You said it yourself, Marcus," she said. "They're not afraid of me because I'm weak. They're afraid because I made them look at me." He nodded. "Then let's give them more to look at." She stepped toward him, her voice lower now, almost reverent. "How many other species have they silenced? How many voices have been crushed under the weight of these alliances? I've spent my whole life trying to be accepted. But maybe it's time we stop begging to sit at their table." Marcus stood, despite the pain. "Maybe it's time we build our own." Within hours, secret messages were dispatched, not through the Grand Forum's official channels, but through the networks of the forgotten. Encrypted pulses sent across broken satellites, hidden frequencies used only by outcasts, engineers, and scavenger diplomats with nothing to lose, and they answered. One by one, small delegations began to arrive, not with parades or honor guards, but quietly, slipping through the gates like ghosts returning from exile. The Tevans, barely a meter tall like the skela, whose inventions had been stolen and patented by larger empires. The Zenti, insectoid refugees whose peaceful colonies had been burned. In wars they weren't allowed to vote on. The Dirchi, a race of empaths who were mocked for weakness, but whose understanding of negotiation once kept 3 sectors from collapse. They came in silence, but they came in a hidden chamber beneath the forum's outer towers. A table was set. No gold, no banners. Just a long slab of polished stone, circled by worn chairs. Lra stood at the head. Marcus beside her. She looked around at the gathered leaders, none taller than Marcus's waist. All of them once ignored. All of them now ready. Thank you for coming, she began, her voice firm. I know what it cost each of you to be here. The Tevens representative, an old woman with grease-stained hands, folded her arms. We came because we saw what you did, what they did to you. We're tired of being stepped on. A low murmur of agreement rippled through the room. They think we're weak, Laura said. But weakness isn't what makes a species fall. Isolation does, division, and that's what they've done to all of us. She paused, then continued. I'm done asking for recognition. From now on, we demand it. Marcus stepped forward, arms crossed, voice calm but cutting. You don't need to outmuscle them. You just need to outnumber them. And right now, they don't see you coming. Silence. Then the Zenti leader, her antenna twitching, stood slowly. We've waited a long time for someone to speak first. She looked at Laura. We're with you. And like dominoes falling, the rest followed. The Tevens, the Dirchi, the half-blind navigators of the Myrix belt, the deep-sea diplomats of Thorsoon. Races with no flags, no fleets, no votes. Until now, until her. An alliance was born not of empire, but of will. And the galaxy would soon feel it, later. That night, Laura stood alone on a high balcony overlooking the city. Her fingers rested on the cold stone, her eyes tracking the distant traffic of starships overhead. It's happening, isn't it? She asked softly. Marcus appeared beside her. You started something that can't be undone, he said. Are you with me? She asked. He smiled. I was with you the moment you stepped up to that podium. A silence passed between them. Not empty, but full of trust. Of purpose. They'll come for us harder now, she said. The Orians, the giants. The ones who built their rule on silence. Then we make noise, Marcus said. She turned to him, smiling faintly. What do you call an alliance of the forgotten? He shrugged. History in progress. They stood together as the night deepened, the stars glittering above like promises yet unbroken. And in the rooms below, in the whispers between chambers, the old powers began to stir with panic, because, for the first time in centuries, the galaxy was no longer theirs alone. The sky above the forum turned violet as the twin suns dipped behind the horizon. Twilight stretched long over the golden towers, casting shadows that seemed to whisper of storms to come. The final council meeting was scheduled for dawn. It was here. In this last session, that Princess Lara's new alliance, the United Voices Compact, would formally submit its bid for recognition. If accepted, it would shake the foundations of the Stellar Alliance. If denied, it would mark the beginning of open rebellion. In her chamber, Lara stood at the center of a small circle. Leaders of the forgotten species gathered close. No aides, no translators. Only those who had been silenced too long. They were not warriors. They were survivors. They were ready. Marcus stood by the door, one hand resting near the blaster at his side. He hadn't said much since nightfall, but his eyes never stopped scanning. The room, the windows, the shadows. They'll make a move tonight, he said softly. Lara nodded. Let them. At the heart of the Orion command compound, General Talek Seethed. Had united more than a dozen minor species. Races his empire had spent centuries crushing into irrelevance. Her alliance had numbers now and sympathy. And worst of all, momentum. The council could not afford another scandal. Not after she survived the trial of merit. Not after the failed assassination attempt. One more failure and the Orians would lose influence. They needed her gone. Quietly. Permanently, before the sun rose, his orders were final. Eliminate the human. Make the princess watch. Then destroy her before the vote. He dispatched an elite strike team. No molten brutes this time. These were silent killers, trained in the deep. Voids beyond civilization. Genetically enhanced. Armed with weapons that never missed. They would strike before midnight. But Lara wasn't a child anymore. She was ready. Beneath the forum's grand library. In the restricted archives, Marcus and Lara had found the final piece of their plan. A clause. In the original founding charter of the Stellar Alliance buried, forgotten. If a coalition of 7 or more member species presents a unified proposal, the forum must vote. And no proposal may be denied without deliberation. She had 12 signatures. They couldn't stop the vote, but they could still try to kill her before it happened. So Marcus stayed awake, guarding her chamber. The first attacker came as a shadow. No
footfall, no whisper.
Just movement, a blur behind the silk drapes. Marcus fired instantly. Glass shattered. A second figure dove through the ceiling panel. Lara ducked behind the marble table as the room lit with energy blasts. Marcus fought like a wolf. Calm, brutal, precise. He took down 2 with clean, quiet kills, but the third moved faster. A blade grazed his ribs. He fell to one knee, blood spilling. Lara screamed. The assassin turned toward her, but before he could strike, Marcus tackled him from behind and drove his blade home. The room went still. Marcus collapsed, coughing. Lara crawled to him, hands shaking. No, she whispered. No, 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 he coughed again. Blood at the corner of his mouth. You okay? He rasped. You're the one bleeding, she snapped, pressing her hands to the wound. He smiled weakly. You've got a vote to win, princess. Don't worry about me. I won't leave you, she whispered. Then carry me. She did. The sun rose over the forum city, lighting its spires in gold. And as the final session began, Ra entered the grand chamber, not alone, but with Marcus at her side, bruised and bleeding, held upright by the only person who had believed in her when no one else would. The chamber fell silent. Even General Talek stood frozen as she walked past him, her steps slow but thunderous. She climbed the central podium, her voice soft but steady. Before we vote, she said, let the record show my people were called insects, cowards, irrelevant, but we survived. And we stand here now not alone but as 12 united species. The forgotten, the dismissed. She turned slowly, facing them all. You tried to erase us. Now we write our names in your history. Gasps echoed. Some delegates stood. Others protested. You cannot force the council. The Tsar and High Lord hissed. LRA held up a signed datapad. I invoke Article 16. We meet the requirement for mandatory vote, and you cannot ignore us any longer. The vote began, delegate by delegate. The tension was unbearable. Marcus sat near the rear, his hand pressed to his wound, watching her with quiet awe. When the final vote came through, the holographic display glowed with green. Past. The United Voices Compact was now a recognized faction. The smallest races in the galaxy now held a voice equal to the Empire's. A moment of silence fell massive. Eternal. Then the chamber erupted. In noise, outrage, applause, disbelief. But Lara didn't hear any of it. She looked only to Marcus. He raised his hand in salute, eyes shining with something between pride and love, and she smiled. After centuries in the dark, the skela had stepped into the light, not because they grew stronger. But because they chose to rise and lead others with them. That night, on the balcony, Overlooking the stars, Laura stood beside Marcus once more. He leaned against the railing, wincing with every breath. "You're going to change everything, you know," he said. "We already did," she replied. He looked at her. "What now?" She turned to him. "Now we build the galaxy they told us we could never have." Marcus smiled. "And what about me?" She reached out, gently taking his hand. "You stay." And in the silence that followed, as the stars turned above them, a new era began. The smallest princess in the galaxy was now its loudest voice, and beside her stood the one man who never looked down at her, only forward.